Every game has a winner and a loser, right? Well, of course not. Sometimes the game can end in a tie, but in chess, we call it a draw. Today, we're going to look at the 5 most common types of draws that you need to know should you ever go play in a tournament. These aren't the only 5, but they're the most important ones. Let's list them right now. One is called insufficient checkmating material. Then, we also have repetition of position. We have stalemate, draw by agreement, and something called the 50 move rule, which takes a lot of explanation. Let's go through them one by one. Here, this is immediately a draw, because nobody can checkmate no matter how hard they try. Go ahead, pull a chess set out. Try to create a checkmate with the king and a bishop against a king. You'll be here until 2100. Nobody can do it. Same thing with a knight. Take away the bishop, put a lone knight on the board. A checkmate cannot be created. With 2 knights, or with 2 bishops, or with a bishop and a knight, it could be created. That would not necessarily be a draw. Also, having 1 pawn on the board is considered enough material to checkmate. Because remember, that pawn can always turn into a queen. Although if it's black's turn, black can get the opposition and draw if he remembers our levels lesson on opposition. Let's go on to the next one. In this position, white's in a bad way. Look at all of black's different checkmates. He can take this guy, he can checkmate here, he's got a triple attack on g2. Clearly, if you're white, if you have a chance to make a draw, that's a lot better than losing. And here, we're going to make a draw by repetition of position. Here's what that means. If you take a picture of the chessboard, and that same picture with all the same pieces in all the same spots has occurred 3 times, that's a draw. Here's how white can do that. He can play knight to a7 check. The king has to go left or right. We're going to pick one. Now we return to the square c6. He better not go in the corner. If he does that, rook to a7 would be an Arabian mate. We'd actually win the game. So the king has to run back to the square c8. Then we give check again. Now he could run the other way, but we just go back to the square c6. When the king moves to c8, this is actually the 3rd time that the exact same position has occurred. If you were counting carefully, you'll notice that. If not, hey, rewind 15 seconds. You'll see it. You'll be able to tell. If the same position happens 3 times, you can stop the clock in your tournament and immediately tell your opponent that you're claiming a draw by repetition of position. Sometimes we call it perpetual check, and that's pretty much the same thing. Oh, by the way, you need to be notating your game in order to prove it. If your opponent challenges you, the tournament director is going to ask to look at your notation sheet, and you'll be able to show him that the same position happened 3 times. Let's move on. Here, white is again in a bad way. Boy, what's up with white today? White's king is about to get checkmated. Rook to d1, rook to e1. Black has many different options. If white can make a draw, he'll be really happy. I'm thinking out loud here, chess kids. If our rook on f7 was missing, it would be what? It'd be a stalemate. We've already had that lesson. Yeah, that was way back in like the knight levels. But we can't just blow our own rook off the chessboard, okay? A gust of wind is not a way to play chess. What we can do is trick our opponent into taking our rook. Now, I don't like rook takes knight because there's no rule that says black has to capture back. He's probably going to play rook to e1 and checkmate us eventually. So instead, I like rook takes a7 because it's check. If the black king takes, what is it? Well, that's right. It's stalemate. Yippee! White has nowhere to move, and he's not in check, and it is his turn. Of course, the black king can try to run away, but we'll just give check again. And if he runs away, we'll give check again. And if he runs away, we can even give check here, because if he takes our rook with his rook, it's actually still stalemate. When he runs away, we give check again. And eventually, you're going to get in the exact same position 3 times. Let's say the king moves here, and we give check, and the king moves here. Now, if you're white and you're about to play the move that creates the position for the 3rd time, you're not actually supposed to make the move that creates the 3rd occurrence of the position. You're supposed to write it down on your notation sheet and stop the clock, then inform your opponent that your intention is to play rook c7 check, and that would be the 3rd occurrence of the position. That's really weird, I know, but the idea is if you make the move that creates the 3rd occurrence of the position and hit your clock, you're not actually allowed to make any draw claims when it's your opponent's clock ticking. Okay, pretty weird, but let's just say if it's your turn and you're about to make the move that creates the 3rd occurrence, write it down, don't actually play it, stop the clock, and you're going to be able to get that draw. Moving on to our next one. The most common way, probably, for a game to end in a draw, especially at the Grandmaster level, is for the two players to simply agree. Here, we've got rook and 2 pawns against rook and 2 pawns. Unless somebody makes a major mistake, the game is going to end in a tie, like king versus king eventually. So, instead of wasting another hour of our life playing this out, you're always allowed in a chess game to simply offer a draw to your opponent, in which case, he can accept or he can decline. Now, a couple words about this. First of all, if somebody offers you a draw, sometimes kids do it because they're in a losing position and don't feel like you have to accept just to be nice, okay? Here, the game is clearly equal, so I think it's a fair, valid offer. The proper way to offer a draw in a chess game is to make your move, as I've just done here. I'll play rook to c1, offer the draw verbally, and then hit your clock. And your opponent has until he makes his next move to accept or decline the draw offer. One more word about draws by agreement. If you draw really early on in the chess game, like on move 10 or 12, you're not really learning a lot about chess. So I only draw by agreement, and I only want my kids to draw by agreement when it's very clearly a tie game near the end. We have one more way for a game to end in a draw. This one is super rare, and sometimes kids get this one wrong. It's called the 50 move rule. Here's what it means. If nobody advances a pawn or makes a capture in 50 consecutive moves for both sides, the game is a draw.
Oh.
Why is this so rare? Well, think about it, kids. 50 moves for both sides in a row without anybody pushing a pawn or making a capture? It's happened all of twice in my entire life. Again, you have to be notating to claim this rule. You have to write down the moves. Sometimes kids say, well, I've played 50 moves in a game and my opponent didn't checkmate me, so it's a draw. Nope, that's not quite it. It has to be only when nobody moves a pawn or makes a capture. Here, black's up a lot of points, but he can't win, even if he offers a rook. If you're white, just don't take the rook. Move your king around. Black will move, you'll move your king around. Okay, we've only played 2 moves for each side. If 50 moves in a row are played, you can stop the clock and claim a draw. Again, you have to be notating. Now, here's where this rule can be of value to you in a tournament. I've had this position before as white. Now, if black plays perfectly, a bishop at knight can give checkmate. We'll talk about that in a later video. However, it's so hard that a lot of kids can't do it in 50 moves. So, if you're writing down your 50 moves and you get to move 50 and your opponent hasn't done the checkmate, you don't have to sit there and be tortured forever. You can stop the clock and claim a draw by the 50 move rule. In fact, something else I learned once, if you don't have time to write down 50 moves because you only have a few minutes left, you can even have the tournament director come over and count 50 moves for you. Wow, that's a really interesting rule. Well, there you have it, chess kids. Those are the 5 most common ways a game can end in a draw. If you have knowledge of them, you might just save yourself some half points in your tournament games.